They fired me for working 2 jobs. They called it conflict of interest. They called it policy violation. They called it unethical behavior. But HR forgot to check one small detail. Which 2 jobs I actually had. And that mistake almost cost them everything. It started with a short email. Subject line: urgent, HR compliance meeting, 9:30 a.m. No explanation, no context, just urgency. When HR sends you an urgent email, you already know it's not good. My name is Daniel Reed, Senior Data Security Analyst. At least, that was my title that morning. The HR room was cold. Not temperature, energy. 3 people were sitting there. HR Director, Compliance Officer, my department manager. No one smiled. The HR Director spoke first. Daniel, we have evidence you've been working 2 jobs simultaneously. React. Because I knew this moment might come. And that violates company policy, she continued. My manager added, you signed exclusivity agreements. I nodded slowly. I did. She pushed a printed document across the table. LinkedIn screenshots, payment transaction records, external login activity. They looked confident, like they caught me. Do you deny this? HR asked. I looked at them calmly. No. The room went silent. They weren't expecting that answer. You admit you were working another job? My manager asked. Yes. His face turned red. HR Director straightened her papers. Then effective immediately, you are terminated for breach of contract. Just like that. No warning. No internal review. No investigation. Security badge deactivated within minutes. Laptop access removed. Escorted out. Publicly. People watching. Whispers starting. Moonlighting. Greedy. Unprofessional. But here's the first twist. They never asked what the second job was. Thought I was freelancing secretly. Maybe working for a competitor. Maybe leaking information. Maybe double billing companies. They assumed the worst. Because assumption is easier than investigation. But assumption is dangerous. 3 years earlier, before I joined this company, I co-founded a cybersecurity consulting firm. Small at first. Just 2 people. Me and my college friend. We focused on compliance auditing and infrastructure risk protection. Nothing illegal. Nothing competitive. And when I joined my current employer, I disclosed ownership stake. Fully documented. Signed approval. Stamped by legal department. They approved it. Because it didn't conflict. Or at least, it didn't then. The growth they didn't notice. Over time, my small consulting firm grew. Quietly. We secured contracts with mid-sized financial institutions. Larger firms. Then government subcontract work. We never advertised loudly. We delivered results. And here's the part HR didn't check. 2 months before they fired me, my consulting company was acquired by a global cybersecurity corporation for equity-based compensation, which made me Executive Vice President of Cyber Risk Operations at a company now responsible for auditing corporate data security compliance, including merger partners. Yes, merger partners. And guess who was negotiating a massive merger? My employer. My employer was preparing for a $1.4 billion acquisition. And regulatory cyber clearance was mandatory. Every system had to cast third-party risk validation. And guess which firm was assigned to perform that audit? Mine. Not because I forced it. Because we were the best qualified. But here's the twist. I had recused myself from direct involvement to avoid conflict. Ethically. Documented. Transparent. But HR didn't ask. They assumed. They terminated. And in doing so, they triggered a contractual clause. The clause. The merger agreement required full disclosure of leadership changes in data security roles. My termination qualified, which meant the acquiring company had to reassess cyber risk stability, which meant audit process paused, which meant stock price dropped 6% in one afternoon. Investors panicked, all because HR didn't ask one simple question. What was your second job? 3 days after being fired, I received a call from my former CEO. Tone very different. Daniel, we may need to talk. I didn't sound emotional. About what? The merger. I stayed silent. Then he continued. Sentinel Cyber Group. Because you didn't ask. But I didn't say that. Instead I said, it was publicly announced in industry press. Silence. They hadn't even researched it. The emergency board meeting. They invited me to an emergency meeting. Different tone now. Less accusation, more concern. The CEO looked tired. Why didn't you disclose this change? I updated compliance documents 2 months ago, I replied calmly. HR director looked confused. She checked her laptop. There it was, email timestamped, attachment included. They never reviewed it, because they were too busy investigating me. Now they understood something terrifying. I wasn't a random employee with 2 jobs. I was executive leadership in the firm auditing their merger security. And legally, I had no obligation to prioritize them anymore. Represented an independent auditing authority. Power shifted instantly. During audit review, my team discovered outdated encryption infrastructure inside my former employer's data servers. Not catastrophic, but serious enough to delay approval. If unaddressed, the merger would fail. They needed time and cooperation. From my firm, from me. I could have been petty. I could have slowed the audit. I could have escalated compliance flags. But revenge is not always loud. Sometimes revenge is leverage. I requested public correction of termination reason, formal apology, compensation for reputational damage, consulting contract under my new company at revised executive rate. They hesitated, but they didn't have options, because losing a $1.4 billion merger over ego would destroy leadership credibility. They agreed. Public statement. Internal memo released. Daniel Reed's termination was based on incomplete internal review. We appreciate his prior contributions. Carefully worded, but enough. Industry rumors reversed. My reputation strengthened. And internally, HR director quietly resigned 3 months later. 6 months later, merger completed successfully. Press release praised cybersecurity integration strategy. And guess who was invited as keynote speaker at the integration summit? Me, standing on stage, looking at executives who once escorted me out. And I said one sentence. Always verify before you accuse. Room silent. Message delivered. They fired me for working 2 jobs, but they didn't check which 2 jobs I had. Employee and executive. They thought I was replaceable, but I was reviewing their replacement. And that is the difference between assumption and awareness.